Hello, Jeff Flaherty. How you doing?
I'm good, Jim. How are you doing today?
I am living the dream. I'm so excited to talk to you about energy efficiency. It's one of my favorite subjects. I had mentioned to you this book, When Can You Do It? Tom Decker from the Attic Depot wrote this book. I wrote the foreword, and what's really amazing is you and I connected today, not because of this, but we're related to all of this. And so it's near and dear to my heart because I love efficiency of the home. It's so important, right? That people don't just have some insulation, don't just have some windows and doors and seals and HVAC systems, but it needs to be all tied together. So you help the homeowner basically through testing and so forth, diagnosis, put together the best remedy for the most efficient home they can have.
Yeah, that's correct. That's our process. People want us to run out to the home and measure the length and width and multiply it by something. And we don't want to do that. We want to go out and first do an interview, find out what the client needs. Just because I think the home is uncomfortable at 50, maybe they think it's comfortable. So it's not really a problem for them. We want to find out what issues they have in the home, what they'd like to change. And then we go through and do an energy assessment. There are 50 tests you could do in the home. We don't have the 8 hours to do that. So we pick a couple of particular tests that we think are going to be the most important. One of them being this blower door test behind me. So test first, don't guess.
The blower door test, it's literally a blower on the door.
It is.
Everybody seal
thinks
everything up, right? So why don't you explain a little bit for those of the people who are listening and watching, don't understand what that is. Explain what a blower door test is.
Yeah, so we know homes leak air, hopefully, because otherwise we wouldn't have fresh oxygen, but we don't know how much air a home leaks. So we have a door that has a expandable frame. We just open up the main door in the home. Mm-hmm. And we put that frame in there with the fan. It has a computer doing some calculations, and it's measuring the pressures in the inside of the home, the outside of the home, and the fan. And with that, it'll calculate and quantify how much air leaks out of the home at an exaggerated rate. So I always say it quantifies the leakage, and then with a skilled practitioner walking around the home with another pressure device or a infrared camera, we can also qualitatively see where those air leakage paths are the worst and where they're really causing comfort, possible mold issues, energy efficiency issues in the home.
So like you said a few moments ago, it's important that we may not have said it's important, but I believe it's important to have a little bit of leakage. I mean, because we hear about if things are super tight, mm-hmm. we can have problems. Okay. So if it's super tight, which is good, you have to open your windows and doors occasionally because it's not good to have it totally encapsulated. Isn't that correct?
Well, that is really where our science comes in. We want to tighten that home down. Yep. We want to seal it tight and then ventilate right. So we can control that air leakage leaving the home. We can do it simplistically with something as simple as a bath fan. So bath fans are exhausting the air, hopefully not just to the attic, but right outside the home. Per code, they're supposed to be exhausted to the exterior of the home. And then even though the box of the fan has a rating for how much cubic foot per minute air leaks out of that or moves out of that fan, we can actually test it. And it's usually not going to test what the rating on the box says. So if it's 50 CFM, cubic foot per minute, and we know that we run it for 30 minutes, then we know we've exhausted 1,500 cubic foot per minute. And then if we properly control the air coming in and get it into a filtration system like a ducted furnace, then we're controlling that fresh air, bringing it in at the appropriate time. And really, that's where the industry is going to go. Currently, I think we're one of the rare companies that does an indoor air quality test with every energy assessment. So we do a 30-minute indoor air quality test so that we don't over tighten a home that already has a problem. We don't want to see people. We bring all kinds of stuff in our homes, paints and perfumes and cleaners. We don't want to see an existing problem and tighten it up. We want to solve that source problem first, then tighten it up, and then look to make sure the proper ventilation is there for the folks.
Yeah, no, I love this. I want to talk to you in a moment about the radio show that you do, because you're able to talk to your community about what you do, which is important. But first off, I want to ask, how did you get into this business?
Well, I think it's a good lesson in volunteerism. One day I was doing a job and a friend of mine said, "Hey, we're going over to drywall a guy's home, and there's 7 guys, but nobody really knows how to drywall." And I was looking for some, a little break, and I said, "Some physical labor sounds good." I went over, and one of the gentlemen who was there, I ended up taking over the job and helping really get this insulator drywall project going. And one of the gentlemen was running a state program for our state energy efficiency company or organization. It's called NYSERDA. And he asked me if I was interested in the position, and it just clicked with me. Once I got in, if I went to a home one time doing a quality assurance visit. So I was working for Honeywell as a subcontractor for the state. And I went to a home that had a contractor out that did work. And now the client was sick. She'd lived there for 7 years. She'd had work done through this energy efficiency program. And all the stuff sounded great. New furnace, some foam insulation, some cellulose insulation, except there was already roof leaks. There was water in the basement. And this client was suddenly ill after living there for 7 years. And she had just spent all this money for someone to break her home. And I walked out of that home knowing, wow, this stuff is really serious, what we do. And if it's done wrong, we can cause harm in a person's home. We can cause harm in a person's life. And it really, at that moment, it clicked. And I said, this is for me. I'm going to try to learn as much about this industry as possible so that I can help people make informed decisions.
It's a science, and a lot of people who install and service these products don't know much, and the consumer doesn't know much. You understand the importance of it and how it works. So it's kind of like when we're born, no one gives us a manual on the body, but over the decades or hundreds of years, people have studied the science and doctors and so forth. So we know something about how things work. So if something's not working well, we can go to the doctor and they can diagnose it. And they say, we don't know everything about the body, but we know quite a bit. And we think you've got this. So we're going to recommend that you take this, you sleep here, you do that. And if things aren't good in 10 days, call us and we'll have you come back in and take a look at it again. You're pretty much like the doctor, aren't you?
Yes. And to your point on that analogy, Jim, that's really not only, that's almost an exact mirror of what we do. We assess, we interview the client, we look at the home, we order the appropriate tests. Your doctor isn't going to order everything under the sun. You're not going to get a CAT scan, an MRI, an X-ray. You're going to get the specific test you need for your home. We recommend the treatment, and then we come back and test. We don't just walk away and say, aha, you're done, because each home is dynamic. Each person operating the home is different and going to operate it in their own style. So we stay with clients afterwards to say, this was done. Let's see how this works for you. 9 times out of 10, that works beautifully. Sometimes we need to come back and maybe do a tweak. But the important thing is to come back and do that test. Because if we don't, if something's going wrong in that home, it's just going to exacerbate itself for the next 10 years.
Yeah. Everything from mildew and mold to just poor air quality, movement is so important. I've learned so much on the radio by interviewing people in ventilation, insulation, HVAC. And the ones I get to interview on my radio show are obviously experts and concerned about it. The ones I don't aren't necessarily. They just install the HVAC system or the insulation, and they're like, yeah, we'll add 6 inches and it should be fine, without necessarily making sure that the soffit vents are open or any other ventilation is open, that there's enough going out through the roof. That's, scientific. Tom Decker taught me that, the guy who wrote, When Can You Do It? And it's important. I'm kind of fortunate because I interview so many people on podcasts, on radio as well. I, learn a lot from you guys. And speaking of radio, you do a radio show in your local market to educate the consumer, the homeowner in the area. Talk a little bit about that, because I don't just find it fascinating. I know why you do it. That stuff works.
Yes. Yeah, it started up at least a couple of years ago, and we really just needed a longer format to tell people you're about to make a 20-year decision on your insulation or your HVAC. You want to make the most educated decision you can make. And it's too much. It's too hard when we come into people's homes to do the testing and get the information to them. So it's really been it's been a fun experience to really slow it down and kind of get granular on a particular insulation type or a particular housing stock. Each area of the country has its own housing stock. I'm very familiar with my housing stock. If I went to a different area, I would have to learn your housing stock. So we get to see these same issues over and over again, and the customer doesn't recognize that their home is different than other people's homes. Everybody thinks it's the same solution, and it's really not. And so when we can educate them on how to properly plan for an assessment. So when we talk about that blower door test, if you have a wood burning stove or fireplace, it cannot be burned for 24 hours before the test. So we need to get that information out to people to let them know, be prepared for us. We're coming to do these tests. This is a professional inspection. We want to do the best we can for you. It's important that you're prepared for us. So, the topics range from all over the place. Sometimes we bring experts in from passive house builders or suppliers, and it's been a fun experience.
Yeah, it's really a great way to educate the consumer, like I had mentioned. I'll tell you also what's great about doing what you do on the radio is when you and your team members go out to the home, they already know, like, and trust you, and you're a celebrity. You really are. They're like, yeah, you're the guy on the radio. Has that happened to you when you go out to the home? They're like, I listen to you all the time. And you're really not just another technician from an HVAC company or a home energy efficiency company. You're like that guy on the radio who knows everything.
Right. Yeah, they do. I will get that feedback, or they'll email in and the correspondence and say, "Hey, I love the show. I learned so much." And I even feel, from a local standpoint, I love the beauty of it, because maybe you don't live in the area, but I can point you to a particular recording of that show that'll help you, make the right decisions in your home, even if I can't help you because you're not in my area. So I really like that feature about it. And it just gives a longer form opportunity for people to slow down and make the right decision for their home.
Great way to build trust, to educate, and to market your business. And I'm just so excited because I talk to so many people in home service, and they don't necessarily want to hear about something that's worked well for over 100 years. It's an older type of medium. It's the only one that really hasn't changed. In my studio here, I have a radio with the RCA brand on it from 1930. Takes a while to warm up, but that still will receive a message on a traditional AM broadcast. There's no other medium. It hasn't gone through changes. You can't take a television from the year 1998 and have it operate because it went digital. And so it's like this dinosaur, but people still use it and trust it. Every car that's manufactured, except for maybe a couple, I think maybe Tesla may not have AM and FM radio in it, but almost every car is still being produced with it. And so it's one of these mediums that a lot of people think have died. It has shrunk, but there's such great people who listen to it and they're homeowners, and you can help them. And not a lot of people are doing what you do. And I commend you for it.
Thank you.
So what's your future? Where do you find yourself in your business in 5 and 10 years?
So we're often asked sometimes in-house, why do you want to grow? And I say, we're putting out an exceptionally good product. Yeah. I feel it's a disservice to not offer it to more people. As we discussed earlier, one of the only companies that I'm aware of that's running an air advice, a 30-minute indoor air quality test. I believe code, each state's a little different on code, but most of them follow the latest IEC code. We're tightening up these homes, as we talked earlier, but we're walking away and never thinking about what happened. So we're oversizing equipment. We didn't seal the ducts, and there's really a potential for mold in these homes. And it's more important to get that word out than ever. Sadly, I think we'll be going and fixing some of these newer built homes. We did one about a year ago, the 2-year-old home, custom built home, and his second floor was 7 degrees colder than his first floor. And typically people don't want to spend money. They call us, they want a report to go back to their builder. Well, your builder probably never had a line item that said you'd have comfort. They just said you'd have insulation to this level and your HVAC would look like this. And it was a year-old custom built home, and we pulled the insulation out of the attic, air sealed it, and our blower door test was 2,100, and we took it down to 1,400. So it was a year-old home, and we cut a third. He wrote online instantaneously that the temperatures now were equal in his daughter's room, and he was thrilled. He wasn't happy that he had spent money on a brand new built home, but he was thrilled that, the home was now working properly. And I always think that we're a hardy folk, right? And so these homes are 100 years old. You can live in them. You can be uncomfortable. And my parents told me to put on another sweater and another pair of socks. And so we sort of think that these homes can't be improved because we've been led to believe that it is what it is. This house has been here 50 or 100 years. And the truth is, we can make dramatic changes and make that room or that house perform the way you'd really like to have it perform. So I see Wise Home Energy expanding our footprint and, growing geographically, probably in Western New York, and just really making sure we're working with people that, what's the saying? Good stuff isn't cheap and cheap stuff isn't good. I mean, if you want a premium product, we can offer that to people. We go around and we eat organic chicken and we go do yoga. And what's the air we're breathing? So if we're uncomfortable, if these temperature swings are in your house or the air you're breathing is poor, I don't think that's helping you out in your health quest if you're looking to improve your life. So,
Jeff, I think a lot of people take things for granted and they make assumptions. It's a new house. Everything in it must be safe. Well, there's off-gassing from things anyways, from the paint to the carpet to, everything. I mean, that stuff's, possibly causing cancer anyway. Okay. There's just all kinds of, issues, but we don't think much about it because we think everything's safe. And we don't think much about the fact that there should be good circulation of air and ventilation in your home. It might be comfortable in your home, but your attic may actually have mold. Why could that be? Well, there's obviously an issue. There's too much moisture and it's not being pulled out, and it's mathematical, and it may be different in the winter than it is in the summer, than it is in the spring and the fall. But these are issues. Sometimes we'll see on our windows or windowsills this little black stuff and it's a little damp. often in the winter, maybe condensation. Well, that's like mildew. We see it in the shower, right? So we know what that is and we clean it off, but that can be all over the house and it could be worse. It could be mold.
Yeah.
And that can actually kill you, not to scare people, but it's not good stuff. New builds, how often do you run into a new build where you're like scratching your head saying, I can't believe these people just paid $422,000 for this home. And the builder didn't care about it. And I'll tell you one thing before you go on here. The builder doesn't live in it.
Right.
If they did, maybe they do things different. So anyway, so the builder builds this thing. They're moving them like they're cattle. To your point, there really isn't a line item saying, well, we're going to give you a good overall feeling of climate inside your home and comfort. We make sure there's a roof, there's a foundation, there's walls, there's sheetrock and some insulation, and good luck.
Yeah.
So once again, how often do you run into a new build where you're like, what are they doing? What have they done?
I'd say quite a bit. A lot of the new build folks that call, like I said earlier, they're kind of standoffish on getting these tests because they think they bought a brand new built home, and it's when you have that brand new built home with the furnace, like you said, the PVC. Well, this is the realtor. Everybody says that's a high efficiency furnace. It doesn't really matter if it's properly sized or it's properly ducted or the ducts are sealed, if it's leaking to the outdoors. All these things really contribute to not just energy efficiency, but really the growth potential for mold. One of the things I see up in my neck of the woods is the realtors, or there'll be a real estate transaction and they'll say, you have mold in your attic. And New York's one of, I think, 5 states that kind of regulates the mold industry. But these folks come in to remediate, I'll quote it, and I just call it the magical paint. They go up in the attic and they spray this paint over the roof. And now the real estate transaction is able to go forward, but they never stop the moisture source. So lo and behold, 3 years later, we get the call and the moisture is kind of showing up on the magical paint that only lasts 3 years. It seems criminal to me that they are masking the problem with paint. And
literally, yeah.
Yeah. And how many of those new built homes, end up with situations like that in attics that we can get to? But what about the interstitial walls and the floors between the first and second levels? If you don't have access to that by the time the mold shows up on the ceiling, it's really a big problem. And we go to doctors and we think there's allergies, and what are those allergies? Sometimes we might be just allergic to the home we're in because the mold is spitting off the spores and we're not reacting well to it.
If you see mildew and mold show up on your painted sheetrock, you could have a disaster behind the wall. So it's like when you go to the doctor and you're like, I've been kind of tired lately and I don't feel so good. And they run some tests and they're like, you've got 6 months to live. You couldn't see a lot on the outside of the body, but the inside's riddled with cancer. The same thing can happen inside the walls. We see it on these home improvement shows where they like open up a wall and they go, oh my gosh. Yeah. And there's a disease inside the walls. And that's often where it starts, right?
It does. And in fact, there's a story, I believe in Texas, of a homeowner who was suing the builder for a new built home 6 months into it. And there's no active water leak. This is ambient air, relative humidity that's condensing in the wall cavities, and instantly the client's wife got sick, the dogs got sick. And looking at the house, I'd say this is $1 million home, and they weren't able to live in it. And when you start, nothing against the builders, but the builders are using subcontractors, and where that liability falls is a gray area that you don't want to end up at. So you sort of want to have your own checklist when you go to build a home. Are the ducts tight? We have a similar device that you can measure the ductwork. Is the blower door appropriate? Is the moisture being managed? So in my neck of the woods, homes are dynamic. Sometimes of the year it might be a little dry. You might want to add a little humidity. Other times of the year or in basements, we might want to dehumidify. So the home just is similar to the outdoor conditions that are putting effects on it. So we have to plan, for those fluctuations in the ambient temperature. And a good way to look at it is similar to your car HVAC system, right? Your car HVAC system has numerous speeds. You can hit a button and bring fresh air into the car. You can filter the air. It has an air filter. So it does a lot of the things that we need in a home that our typical HVAC system, probably doesn't do unless it's been thought out and added on, some of these things, filtration and fresh air and dehumidification or humidification.
So you're in upstate New York, and I'm very familiar with upstate New York, lived there. I was born in New York. A number of months of the year, you can open your windows and doors because it's nice. The fall, the spring, it's really the winter you need to keep it closed. And in the summer, even, you could open the doors and windows here and there. Is that good or bad?
So that's a great question, Jim, because I'm a fresh air person. That's the way I'd love it to be, is just open those doors and windows and let the fresh air come in. It's a good thing. I love it, but it's not the best way to rely on properly filtrating your air and make sure you're getting fresh air, because it may not, depending on wind pressures, it may not mix through your home. It might just come in this window and go out the window across the hall. So it may not mix throughout the home and give you that fresh air. So a good system, if it's either a furnace or an ERV and HRV, will mix the air, filtrate the air, and bring fresh air in. So it's all kind of in that design system. Can you work with your existing system, or do you need to install your own separate system?
The houses today are really tight when they're built, versus 100 years ago. And they're designed differently. In your neck of the woods, there's a lot of older homes. Okay. What's the difference when you're approaching this? So someone calls you out and it's a 6-month-old build, brand new, everything's new technology. And then, so you address it one way. Do you address it the same way where the house is 120 years old?
That's a great question. I feel like every house is going to give you some of those core components that I'm going to be looking at. So in my neck of the woods, that 100-year-old home, there's a real potential to have empty walls. So I spend a little more time making sure the walls have been upgraded. Whereas maybe a 10 or 20-year-old home, presuming code was involved and with an infrared scan, I can say these walls are insulated. This isn't really where I need to look. I need to look at different areas. So it's interesting in that regard. So the house will kind of lay out what you're gonna look for, and I view it as similar to I always say in this neck of the woods, people go to Florida or they go to Arizona. Well, some people like it hot and humid, so they go to Florida. Some people like it hot and dry, so they go to Arizona. So it kind of depends on what end result you're looking for, but you start with that beginning structure in mind and say, here's some core weaknesses of that structure that can be upgraded. Let's look for those before we start looking at it like a 10-year-old home. Hopefully we can get it to the point where it's a 10-year-old home. But yeah, each structure kind of has its own building strengths and weaknesses.
I guess getting back to the doctor analogy, if you're 21 years old and you have bad knees because of football, and you're 81 years old and you've got bad knees, not the same knees, need to be addressed maybe a little differently.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Absolutely.
Yeah. Before we conclude, what would you like to touch upon? What haven't we talked about that you'd like to get across?
Oh, sure. I just, say to your listeners, test, it's, our documentation process is, sometimes 400 pictures per house. We want to do the best for you. When you call us up in 5 years, we're going to be able to pull those pictures up and show it. So I am in the land of Eastman Kodak. So even though film has disappeared, we take lots of pictures. So, and then the same with the testing. We want to show, similar to when you walk into the doctor's office, they're always starting with those same tests, right? We're going to get your height, your weight, your blood pressure, because we want to know your baseline. And the next time you come back a year later, we're going to look at those and say, where are you compared to where you were a year ago? And being able to record that information, homeowners don't seem to know of it. So demand it of your contractors, demand that information, I would say.
Yeah, well said. Jeff Flaherty, Wise Home Energy. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jim. Appreciate it.